Welcome to St. James, an Eastern Orthodox Christian church. Today's homily is by Father Timothy Barkley, as recorded on April 12, 2025.
The reading is from the Holy Gospel according to St. John. Let us attend. At that time, a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to Jesus, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness is not unto death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by means of it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, Jesus said to his disciples, Let us go into Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were but now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. Thus he spoke, and then he said to him, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him out of sleep. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary sat in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, he who is coming into the world. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying quietly, The teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Then Mary, when she came where Jesus was and saw him, fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, and he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, By this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that you would, if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. I knew that thou hearest me always, but I have said this on account of the people standing by, that they may believe that thou didst send me." When he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with bandages and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and seen what Jesus did, believed in him. In the name of the one true God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. My brothers and sisters, Christ is in our midst. Pray for me, my brothers and sisters. An acquaintance of mine grew up in Larnaca on Cyprus. And an interesting thing about Larnaca is that in that town there is a church, and that church is the Church of the Holy Lazarus. And in that church is his crypt. And she told me that, she was telling a group of us, she grew up in that town, and when she had something come up that she needed help with or she couldn't figure out, she'd just go talk to the saint. She'd just trot on down to the church and sit beside his crypt and talk to him. The cool thing was he would answer. She just talked to him. I have a test, and I've been studying, but I just can't get this. Can you help me? Was her example. So just as a kid, the saint's there, so you go talk to the saint. It's not a big spooky kind of thing. He's just there, and you just go talk to him like you talk to, the priest or any other kind of important holy person, or maybe very important holy person. You just go talk to him. Lazarus was the friend of Christ, the one whom you love, is sick. I don't think that after Lazarus was raised from the dead by Christ, that he somehow stopped being the friend of Christ. That was like a one-time appellation that didn't apply for the rest of his life. In fact, I think I know differently, because the whole notion of the veneration of saints arose from this very idea, that you just go talk to him. Like you'd go talk to your priest, except that he was, permanently stationary and horizontal. So you just go say, "Oh, Father so-and-so, Bishop so-and-so, pray for me. I'm being persecuted. I'm suffering tribulation. I have a big test. Something's going on at work. My spouse and I are having some conflict. Help." Just like you go talk to anybody, because they're somebody. We want to put the saints kind of up on this kind of way off spooky pedestal and treat them like, they're somebody that we pray to, like in some spooky way. We just go talk to them. And we say, "Holy Saint Timothy." And holy, yeah, he's right. He is set apart unto God. The interesting thing is, it's not so much that God picked him up and plopped him in this little circle called holy people. He made himself that way by being the friend of God, by being the one who made the investment of his time and energy and effort to develop an intimacy with and boldness with God, because the saints have great boldness before God. When the saints go before God to ask for things, they don't do spooky, weird stuff. They just go and ask for it. And because they have great intimacy with God and this relational connection, God delights to give them what they ask. God delights, like a father delights to fulfill the requests of his children who come to him and ask with boldness because they're children. right? When my kids come to me, they don't say, "Oh, Holy Father Timothy, can you please, I pray to thee." They just say, "Dad, I'm hungry. Is there any food?" The other day, my son didn't have any food for breakfast, and he didn't say, "Ooh." He said, "Dad, do you have anything?" I said, "Yeah, on my shelf in the freezer, there's this shrimp thing you can have." And that's the way the saints come to God. "Father, I need this." And he says, "Oh, okay." Or he might say, "No, that wouldn't be good for you. So, no." But he never says, "I don't have it." Unless, of course, we're asking for something that's not of him, then of course I don't have that. Sorry, I just don't have that. But the saints have developed, in that intimacy with God, they have developed a relationship such that they don't say anymore, "Not my will, but your will be done." That's just the fact of their existence. And the really cool thing is that saints didn't start out as saints, right? When your patron saint was born, their first name was not Saint. Who's this? This is Saint Juliana. No, she was just Juliana. She grew up like every other kid grows up. I mean, in terms of, eating and drinking and playing or whatever she did. She probably didn't sin as much as every other kid, hopefully, but maybe she did. Maybe her life changed at some point. Who knows? There are great saints who were great sinners. There are saints. I told you about this a little while ago. There is a saint, I can't remember his name. There were two brothers in a little village in Greece. And they would refuse to nurse on Wednesdays and Fridays. And there are people still alive today, or at least were alive a little while ago when this lady was telling this story, because she knew one of the ladies, who were in the village and knew these two little boys that wouldn't eat on Wednesdays and Fridays, the only way an infant can eat. And I would guess that they, being infants, were hungry, and they did what hungry infants did and made everybody around them miserable 2 days a week. So people would come in and try to trick the kids. "Oh, I'm glad it's Thursday now," or something. I don't know. And one of them is now Saint somebody. The other one was an abbot of a monastery. Hasn't been canonized. I don't know. So there are people that grow up that way from the very beginning as they exit the womb. Others live what we would call normal lives. Some live exemplary lives of sin, like Saint Moses, the Ethiopian. Wasn't just bad, he was a bad dude. I mean, he went around killing people and raping women and stealing things and doing terrible things, and is now Saint Moses. Saint Moses. There is no disqualifier for sainthood. In fact, we are all called to be saints, says St. Paul. We are called to develop that level of intimacy and closeness to God as his children, that we can come to him and just ask for what we need. And he, as our loving Father, delights to give it. Now, what happens when we develop that intimacy and we come to him and we say, "Father, I need this," and we don't get it? Well, first off, the question is, do we have that intimacy? Because we tend to be the people who operate according to worldly expectations, and if I don't understand the purposes of God, then I'm going to doubt that he really loves me. Because if I'm suffering something and some bad thing is happening to me or to someone I love, if I can't understand how this is the purpose of God, then I can doubt God's love. Just like the Jews. Well, couldn't the guy who opened the eyes of the blind stop this guy from dying? How can we worship him? How can we accord him love? He's obviously an arbitrary and capricious God who doesn't care about people who love him. Lazarus, after all, was the friend of Jesus who loved him, and Jesus supposedly loved, except that he didn't keep him from dying. So what kind of friend is that? Why would we worship him? Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Lazarus was raised from the dead and yet died again in AD 63. That's why there's a crypt by which my friend could sit and talk to him. Well, okay, so Lazarus died not once but twice. 2 times he had to go through this ordeal. Was he not the friend of Christ? Was he not the one whom Jesus loved? And Jesus didn't just let him die, he let him die 2 times. That he says he might be glorified. Now, how is he glorified? Well, we don't have to understand. We don't have to know. We, as modern materialist, scientistic, naturalistic humans in this 21st century, think that everything has to be reduced to formulas that we can comprehend. What we believe is that if God doesn't fit inside my head, I shouldn't worship him. That's what that boils down to. If I can't understand how the purposes of God are for my good, then he is not worthy of worship. Because he's arbitrary and capricious and mean and nasty. Because he's letting me suffer when he could stop me from suffering. And if he can stop me from suffering and chooses not to, why would I worship him? What I'm saying is because I don't understand God, therefore I will not worship God. What I am saying is because God is not less than me, he is not worthy of worship. But that is completely absurd. Because if he was less than me, why would I worship him? I would worship me. And in fact, that's what I'm doing when I go down that path that says, because I cannot comprehend how the purposes of God are loving or for my good or gracious or joy-filled or peace-giving, therefore, he is not worthy of worship. And we run into this all over our culture. When you talk to people, they say, but what about suffering children? What about suffering adults? What about, who cares? What about? I mean, all these things. What about those things? And the answer is, if you have to understand before you can believe, before you can have faith, you will never have faith, you will never believe. And because God is not less than you, you will never understand. Guaranteed. If God reduces himself to fit inside your head, you have become God. And he won't do that because he can't. Not because he doesn't love us, but because we can't take it. He reduced himself to fit inside just one person just once. That's why we call the Theotokos more spacious than the heavens. Because the God who fills the heavens was inside her. But he doesn't put himself inside our minds so that we can comprehend him and reduce him to a cipher. Because he loves us too much. Not that it were even possible, but even if it were. Because he loves us too much. Because if he fit inside our heads, we would be God. And we're not. He is. Faith comes before understanding. Sometimes understanding never comes. Some things are just incomprehensible. Some things are absurd. Suffering in its source is absurd. It is insane. Because suffering is the result of sin, and sin is the rejection of the God who is the truth. You'll never understand suffering because it is incomprehensibly insane. It's absurd. I mean, in the old meaning of the term, it cannot be reduced to sensicality. There's nothing there. There's no there. Suffering is the result of the absence of the good. So suffering is a vacuum. If you try to project thought into it, it just gets sucked in and dispersed and there's nothing left. Don't try to understand it. Try to receive the God who is still God in it. He is the resurrection and the life. It is in receiving him that we receive all things. And then whether our bodies or our minds or our friends or whoever suffers, yes, we seek to ameliorate suffering out of love, because suffering is the result of sin, and we seek to undo the results of sin in this world. That's why we study medicine. That's why we study science. That's why we pick up trash beside the road, to get it very pedestrian, literally. That's why we do the good we do, is to reverse the effects of sin. But we don't have to understand it before we try to help the people who suffer from it. Instead, we project ourselves as what? Those who partake of the divine life into places of darkness, into places of insane absurdity in which lifelessness reigns. And we come, like the woman now known as Saint Teresa of Calcutta, into places of deepest abject suffering. And we become the light of Christ. We become him there. Because that's what we're called to do. But we're not going to go there and explain to the lepers why they're suffering so that it all makes sense. And they can understand and they can accept their leprosy as, no, because it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. It's nonsensical. Don't try to explain it. When people come to me and say, Father, I need you to help me understand why my kid suffers, why my parents suffer, why my mother has dementia, why this terrible thing, what I have to tell them, you can't understand. It's not understandable. It is outside the realm of logic. Yes, we can talk about, God's purposes and God's plans and sin in the world and help people comprehend how these things happen, what the roots of them are. But to look at a child who's disabled from the womb and suffering immensely and try to help the parents understand that, you do violence to the humanity of the people you're talking to. You just say. You have to say. He is, let me introduce you to the one who is the resurrection and the life. My grandfather was a devout Baptist. He was a pastor, started dozens of churches, and he used to do revivals. And he did this revival once. And there was this young lady there, and she had polio, and her body was all crippled up. She couldn't walk. And as he shared the gospel, she came up to him and she said, you talk about the resurrection and coming back to life. She said, when I come back to life, she said, will my body be fixed? He said, sweetheart, you will have a glorified body in the resurrection. There will be no sickness. There will be no polio. There will be no post-polio. There will be none of that. And she said, I'll get my body back. And he said, yes, you'll get your body back. And she said, then baptize me. I'm coming in the church. And she was baptized. And all the way to the water and all the way back out. He took her down in a river and baptized her. She was saying, I'll get my body back. I'll get my body back. I'll get my body back. That's the resurrection and the life. We suffer here. We don't suffer there. But when we suffer here, we participate in his suffering. We join with him. We can then learn to give thanks for our suffering. We can then, the great saints talk about clutching our suffering to ourselves like a lover clutches a lover. Because that is what enables us to be Christ. When we fast and we're hungry, we embrace our hunger because it is what lets us be like Christ, who fasted 40 days in the wilderness and didn't eat, from the Last Supper until his crucifixion. When we're thirsty, we caress the thirst as we are thirsty because we're not drinking before the liturgy. We say, oh, thank God. Thank you for this thirst. It enables me to be like my Lord who on the cross said, I thirst. All of those things, we put our lips to the chalice of which he drank and said, take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours be done. That is what makes this beautiful, joy-filled, redemptive. Yes, it's hard. It's very hard. It's sometimes so hard that we sweat blood like he sweat blood. So we say, thank God that I am counted worthy, although unworthy, to engage in what he engaged in and to extend myself past the points of human endurance. Thank God. Thank you for this, because I become him. How else are we going to become him? The great saints who didn't suffer prayed that God would give them cancer and dread diseases so that they could suffer. because they yearned to be like Jesus. And we, in our culture that's so permeated with this kind of easy believism and prosperity gospel, we think that if we stub our toe, Jesus doesn't love us. No. If we stub our toe, it's because he does. He's the one who couldn't even walk up the road because he was carrying his cross. So if I'm limping, I'm like Jesus. Thank God. I don't go bang my head against things and bang my foot against things. That's presumptuous. I don't go outside without a coat on in the wintertime in the rain. That's presumptuous. That's tempting God, and you don't tempt the Lord. But if he visits us with something, then we embrace it and we say, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is how I become like Christ, who was betrayed by all his friends, who suffered in the body, who was alone on the cross. And in the end, all he could do was pour himself into the hands of God. Into your hands, O Lord. That's all he had. That's all there was. And when we get to that point, we say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I am now truly Christ. And I am his, and he is mine. And because he is mine, all the world is mine. And all of glory is mine. And I stand resplendent in the glory of God because I have become him. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Thank you for listening to today's homily by Father Timothy Barkley. Come worship with us at 30 York Street in Taneytown, Maryland on Sundays at 10 a.m. You may also contact us via www.stjamesorthodoxchurch.org.